Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Michele Missy. In the quiet suburbs of Southern California, the disappearance and tragic death of Michele Yvette Missy Avila deeply shook a close-knit community. Her story is one of friendship, betrayal, and a devastating loss that left an indelible mark on those who knew her. The vanishing of Missy Avila caused shockwaves in the community as friends, family, and law enforcement mobilized in a desperate search to find her. The quest to uncover the truth behind her disappearance would reveal a disturbing tale of betrayal among those she trusted. Missy was known for her bright smile and caring nature, a young woman with dreams of a promising future. As the details surrounding her disappearance emerged, the heartbreaking story of friendships turned sinister captivated the nation's attention. This is the story of Michele Yvette Missy Avila, her whose life was tragically cut short. Missy was born on February 8, 1968, and grew up in Arleta, Los Angeles. She lived with her mother and three brothers and attended San Fernando High School with her two best friends, Karen Severson and Laura Doyle. Missy and Karen had been best friends since they were 8 years old, but the girls started to drift apart once they entered high school. Missy was very beautiful and had very long hair, which she loved, and she was quite popular and well-liked by most of her peers. Karen and Laura began to feel envious of the attention Missy received from others, especially from boys. During Missy's sophomore year of high school, a rumor began to spread that claimed Missy had been engaging in sexual relationships with several boys, all of whom had girlfriends. This rumor prompted a group of girls to confront Missy outside of school and assault her severely. As soon as Missy got home, her parents pressed charges against the ringleader of the attack, Sonia Bon. Missy was expected to appear in court on October 8, 1985, to testify against Sonia, but she would sadly never get that opportunity. Earlier in September, Missy had a falling out with both Karen and Laura due to the same rumor that had been spread a year earlier, in which Missy was accused of having sexual relationships with her friends' boyfriends. This time, the two girls involved were her best friends, Karen and Laura. Missy began dating a boy named Randy earlier in their junior year, but their relationship only lasted around a month before Missy broke things off, as she couldn't stand his constant partying. Not long after, Karen and Randy started dating and moved in together. However, Randy still had feelings for Missy, and Karen saw him flirting with her. Missy turned Randy down and told him she wasn't interested in rekindling their relationship. Missy also tried to be a good friend by telling Karen she should consider ending the relationship with Randy and try to find a better boyfriend. This angered Karen, and she and Laura spread rumors again and decided to confront Missy at one of the parks in their neighborhood. Missy tried pleading with them, telling them she would never betray either of them like that, and that these were the same rumors that were spread the year prior. Eyewitnesses claimed that Karen was seen shouting at Missy, threatening her with a broken beer bottle, pushing her to the ground, and slapping her before she and Laura stormed off. This incident occurred 10 days before Missy's murder. Not long after that incident, Laura expressed regret and contacted Missy, and the two of them decided to put everything behind them and continue with their friendship. However, Karen was still avoiding Missy until October 1st, when she contacted Missy and sincerely apologized to her about everything that had escalated between them. This meant a lot to Missy, as she had started to miss her friends, and the trio made plans to hang out at Stonehurst Park later that same day. On October 1st, 1985, Missy told her mom that she made plans to hang out with her friends, and her mom gave her permission to go, but she had to be back home by 6 p.m. Missy went outside and waited for Laura to pick her up. After Laura picked her up, the girls drove around for a while before making their way to Stonehurst Park, where they parked the car and waited for Karen to show up. A few minutes passed, and Karen pulled into the parking lot with their other friend, Eva, in the passenger seat. That's when things took a turn for the worse for Missy. When Karen entered the parking lot, she parked extremely close to Laura's car, rolled down her window, and began yelling at Laura. Laura also rolled down her window and started yelling back at Karen. Missy and Eva just sat there, shocked, watching their friends shout abusive things at each other. Missy had no idea what they were arguing about. Suddenly, Karen backed up and sped out of the parking lot, and Laura followed her for 45 minutes. They drove recklessly north of the city and into the mountains, both girls driving with such extreme anger that Missy and Eva were begging the girls to calm down and pull the cars over. The girls drove right into a parking lot that led to a huge forest. Laura and Karen got out of their cars, confronted each other, and continued to fight. Missy got out of the car in an attempt to stop her friends from fighting. However, as soon as she left the car, Karen and Laura suddenly ceased their argument, turned their attention to Missy, and approached her aggressively. They got so close to Missy that she was unable to re-enter the car or move away from it. Karen then laughed at Missy and informed her that they were not actually fighting and had no animosity towards each other, but rather they were angry with Missy. They revealed that the entire situation was a ploy to lure Missy into the woods so that they could confront her and teach her a lesson. They then shouted at Missy and explained that they had spread the rumors because they knew for a fact that she had slept with their boyfriends, and they were not going to let her get away with it. Missy tried pleading with them, telling them again that she would never do anything like that she never slept with anyone, but they wouldn't listen. When Missy started to shut down, the girls grabbed her and pushed her away from the car and towards a trail that led into the forest. Given that Missy was quite petite compared to the other girls, being only 4 feet 10 and 95 pounds, while Karen was 5 feet 2 and over 200 pounds, and Laura was 5 feet 6 and 135 pounds, Missy was unable to defend herself against the constant pushes by the two girls as they forced her to walk further down the trail. Eva was in the car during the entire altercation. She finally got out of the car and started walking behind the group. Eva was not involved in anything the girls did in the forest, and she didn't even know why she was brought along in the first place. When the group was out of view from the parking lot and deep into the forest, Laura stopped and faced Missy, who was crying helplessly and scared, and punched her right in the face. As soon as Laura started punching her, Karen joined in, and within seconds, Missy was on the ground, being beaten, punched, and stomped on. When they stopped, Laura pulled out a knife, grabbed Missy by the hair, and started cutting off chunks of her hair. They did this intentionally because they knew how much Missy loved her beautiful long hair. Karen wanted to join in on the hair cutting, but since she didn't have a knife, she just started pulling out chunks with her hands while Eva stood there, watching it all happen. After they had finished that activity, they produced restraints, bound Missy's arms behind her back, and gagged her. Since there was a river around 10 feet away from their location, Laura walked into the stream, looked directly at Missy, began running her hands through the water, gave Missy a smirk, and started taunting her, asking her to come into the water with her. When Missy did not move, Karen seized her, forcefully stood her up, and shoved her towards the river, causing her to fall down the hill. Since her arms were restrained behind her back, her face slammed down onto the ground, and she rolled up to the river. Laura and Karen then grabbed her and dragged her into the water. That's when Eva hastily ran back up the trail to the cars. Upon arriving at the cars, Eva realized that both vehicles were locked and too far to fetch assistance. She reluctantly started walking back down the trail until she heard a terrifying scream. She stopped, turned around, and swiftly ran back to the cars, where she lay on the ground in a fetal position and waited for approximately an hour for the girls to return. Eventually, she saw Laura and Karen, who were dripping wet and smiling and laughing, but Missy was not with them. Laura and Karen were holding Missy's body in the water that was 8 inches deep. The scream that Eva heard happened when Missy was briefly able to get her head above the water, but then Karen grabbed her head and pushed it back into the water. When the girls realized that Missy was near death, they released her, ran to a large log, and dropped it on her head. The girls then left the forest, got into their cars with Eva, and went home. 4 hours later, Laura called Missy's mother, Irene Avila, claiming that she had dropped Missy off with 3 boys driving a blue Camaro after getting gas. Laura said she returned to the location, but Missy and the boys had already left. On October 4, 1985, Missy's body was found face down in a stream in Big Tuhanga Canyon in Angeles National Forest, 3 days later by a group of hikers. The police found that she had been forcibly drowned in 8 inches of water, and her waist-length hair had been cut off. A 4-foot log was found on top of her body, and cigarettes, beer, and men's overalls were found near where her body was discovered. The girls told Missy's parents and the detectives that Missy had gone off with 2 men in a blue Camaro before she disappeared, which made the random items around the crime scene seem more plausible. This false claim sent the detectives on a fruitless investigation for the non-existent men for 3 years. Irene later said she had no reason to suspect Karen or Laura were involved in her daughter's death because both of them attended Missy's funeral, and Laura sent the family a sympathy card with $20. Karen also moved in with Missy's family for a long time, outwardly showing support and trying to help catch the killers, all while closely monitoring the investigation and attempting to divert the investigators from her own involvement. Karen was intensely focused on the murder, frequently visiting Missy's grave, covering the walls of her room with pictures of Missy and newspaper articles about the crime, and repeatedly returning to the creek where Missy's body was discovered. At one point, she even told Irene that she had seen Missy's ghost. After 3 years, on July 26, 1988, Eva Chirumbolo, the other teenager who had taken the 45-minute drive into the mountains, finally came forward and told the police everything that had happened. She explained the rumors, the falling out, the anger, and the jealousy, as well as the details of the murder. Eva said she took so long to come forward because the other 2 girls had threatened to kill her if she ever revealed what she had seen. In March 1990, Karen and Laura were convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. The jurors were not convinced that the murder was planned, and they rejected the first-degree murder charge. Karen Severson was released from prison on December 9, 2011, after serving 21.5 years, and Laura Doyle was released from prison in December 2012 after serving 22 years. Karen Severson attempted to profit from her crime by writing a memoir about the murder and her prison life, but the book did not do well. She also made a deal for a movie to be made about it, but Avila's family sued her in 2015, seeking to take the profits from the sales. As a result, the state of California passed Missy's Law, requiring entities who are helping publish works made by criminals to contact the families of the victims about the said works. Missy's story has sparked conversations about the impact of bullying, the complexities of teenage relationships, and the importance of fostering a culture of empathy and kindness. Community initiatives and support networks have emerged to provide resources and support for those affected by similar experiences. As we remember Missy, we honor her memory by working to create a world where friendships are built on trust and compassion. Her legacy serves as a reminder that every individual deserves respect, kindness, and the opportunity to live a life free from harm. In the end, Michele Yvette Missy Avila's legacy will be one of resilience and hope. May her memory inspire us all to stand up against bullying, support those affected by betrayal, and work towards a future where understanding and empathy prevail. The case of Kristen Rossum. She could have been a scientist, but she chose a different path. Blonde Kristen Rossum, a chemistry graduate from San Diego State University, could have had a brilliant future. Instead, she is serving a life sentence in the Central California Women's Facility for the crime against her husband. Ralph and Constance Rossum had 3 children and were preparing them for an undoubtedly bright future. The children received education from top schools, were tutored, and participated in clubs and sections for talent development. However, the fragile and impulsive Kristen broke, unable to keep up with the pace in pursuit of the ideal. Lying, skipping classes, and the desire to escape reality first introduced her to a sense of ease and oblivion after consuming alcohol. But soon, alcohol stopped providing the desired effect of tranquility, and she became dependent on the controlled substance methamphetamine. Methamphetamine, meth, is the most addictive illicit substance in the USA. It causes paranoia, clouds judgment, euphoria, and hallucinations. Kristen's erratic behavior and detachment from real life caught her parents' attention. After a long conversation, she admitted that she had been addicted to the substance since high school. This behavior was a severe blow for a family of university-educated professionals. After several months of numerous conflicts with her parents, 17-year-old Kristen secretly ran away to Mexico with friends for a holiday. There, she met a man by chance. Tall, handsome Gregory de Villiers, 7 years her senior, seemed like an angel who would save her. And he did. Greg fell in love with the bad girl. He took on the role of a parent and responsibility for her well-being. With Greg's support, she managed to get a job at a local forensic department as a toxicology assistant. Her skills impressed the employer. Her addiction was forgotten, which worked in her favor, as her job in toxicology provided access to seized controlled substances. As a forensic assistant, Kristen graduated from university with honors. Her teachers and employer praised her, handing her the Best Student Award, unaware of the reasons for her love of the chosen profession. Her relationship with Greg lasted about 5 years and ended with a grand wedding on June 5, 1999. Kristen's parents adored Greg and were at ease for their daughter, as she had climbed out of the pit of dependency and confidently stood on the road to a promising and happy life. In March 2000, Kristen was hired by the San Diego County Medical Examiner's Office as a toxicologist. A toxicologist analyzes body fluids to detect controlled substances. Gregory was working in the biotechnology industry at the time. Kristen quickly grew bored with her monotonous life and began seeking excitement elsewhere. She found an opportunity with a new colleague, Michael Robertson, who had been appointed as the department head. He was married, but that didn't stop a sudden infatuation between them. They couldn't keep their relationship secret for long. Greg found numerous letters exchanged between the secret lovers. The marital relationship deteriorated, but Gregory still hoped to save the marriage, knowing his wife's weaknesses and trying as hard as ever to save her. This time, Kristen didn't want to be saved. She demanded a divorce. On the morning of Monday, November 6, 2000, Kristen was getting ready for work as usual. Greg was ill and stayed home. Kristen was very worried about her husband. In the days following their separation talk, he had been lethargic and unusually calm. She informed his workplace of her husband's illness. She also visited him during her lunch break. Greg was asleep. At 9:22 p.m. that same day, Christine called emergency services to report that her husband, Greg, was not breathing. He had most likely committed suicide because he was home alone. The woman cried into the phone and did not listen to the dispatcher's instructions to examine the body and possibly administer first aid. Police officers and paramedics arriving on the scene at 10:19 p.m. pronounced Gregory de Villiers dead. He was lying on the bedroom floor with his torso exposed, surrounded by scattered rose petals. The room examination suggested that Greg most likely consumed a lethal dose of several controlled substances. Empty vials of powerful painkillers were scattered around, and torn wedding photos were found on his bed. During the interrogation, Kristen stated that she had informed her husband of their separation the previous evening. Just 17 months after the wedding, she regretted getting married. She felt she had rushed into it. Greg was too clingy, and she wanted to distance herself. Greg's death was ruled a suicide. The cause of death was strong sedative drugs. Kristen signed the cremation papers. However, Gregory's family and friends refused to believe in such a sudden suicide. None of them noticed any changes in his character or mood. He had not shared his marital problems with anyone. Greg was so opposed to controlled substances that he would never have taken them. Soon, the relatives managed to stop the cremation and insisted on an independent autopsy. The family's persistence allowed for the consideration of a homicide scenario. Soon, toxicological tests revealed that Gregory's body contained an extremely high amount of fentanyl, a pain reliever 150 times stronger than morphine, along with lesser amounts of clonazepam and trace amounts of oxycodone, known as hillbilly heroin. Investigators speculated that, under the strong influence of clonazepam and other detected drugs, someone else administered the lethal dose of fentanyl to Gregory. Kristen became the prime suspect, as fentanyl is not an over-the-counter medication, and she had ample knowledge and access to such drugs. Upon arrival for interrogation at the police station, Kristen's emaciated, unattractive appearance and her doping behavior indicated her drug dependency. This was confirmed by her own statements on the day of Gregory's death. Kristen was inconsistent in her accounts. Initially, Kristen told paramedics that Gregory had not taken any medication, but later she changed her statement, suggesting he might have taken oxycodone. At the hospital, Kristen told a nurse that Gregory might have overdosed on oxycodone. Oxycodone is similar in effect to codeine-based drugs. It can not only relieve pain, but also induce a sense of euphoria. It depresses the respiratory center, and without timely assistance, its use can be fatal. The police considered the possibility that Gregory died from an accidental overdose of cold medicine and oxycodone. In conversations with Kristen, they also learned that Gregory was very upset about their failing marriage, leading Kristen to tell the police that he ended his own life. This was another investigative avenue they explored. On November 8th, a colleague of Kristen's, Russ Lowe, called the police. He informed them about Kristen's affair with her boss. This information shifted the course of the police investigation. Evidence of Kristen's connection with her boss, Dr. Robertson, was found. The evidence included passionate emails they exchanged, as well as computer files and professional articles revealing Dr. Robertson's specialized knowledge of fentanyl. The criminal puzzle was coming together perfectly. It was suspected that Gregory became a threat to the lovers, as he knew that Kristen, with her access to the lab and controlled substances, was secretly using them, and Michael was covering for her. It was a premeditated crime. The challenge for the investigators was to prove it. During interrogation, Michael Robertson told detectives that he was aware of his lover's drug dependency. At that time, no charges were brought against the couple. They were both dismissed from their jobs for violating several rules during the investigation. Serious trouble for Kristen began in January when police raided her home, finding traces of drugs and paraphernalia. She was arrested for the first time but was later released on bail. The investigation progressed as new information emerged. This included Kristen's diary. During its initial examination, investigators hypothesized that it was written by Kristen not for herself, but for an external reader, as a means of covering up and affirming her innocence while crafting the appearance of Gregory's perfect self-inflicted demise. On the day of her husband's death, she bought a rose in revealing lingerie actions inconsistent with her distressed demeanor. Medical examination indicated that Gregory was unconscious for at least 6 hours before his passing, and his death could have occurred an hour or an hour and a half before it was confirmed. Additionally, a bruise around a needle injection site on the young man's arm was found, its purpose and executor unexplained. At Kristen's workplace, a shortage of the drug that led to Gregory's demise, as well as other controlled substances, was discovered. Police believed Kristen poisoned Gregory, administering fentanyl without his knowledge. The prosecution built its case on toxicological and medical data. With enough circumstantial evidence, Christine was arrested on June 25, 2001, and charged with first-degree murder. After spending 6 months in custody, she was released on bail. The first trial soon commenced. The prosecution's main theory was the motive for the homicide. They argued that she terminated Gregory because he threatened to tarnish her good girl reputation by revealing her renewed drug use and affair with Michael Robertson. The prosecution claimed Kristen poisoned Gregory with fentanyl. The court heard that fentanyl is a powerful synthetic opioid, 80 times stronger than morphine. It was suggested that she first tried to end his life with clonazepam, but when that failed, she administered fentanyl. They also argued that she then staged the bedroom to look like Gregory ended his own life, tearing pages from her diary and placing rose petals and a wedding photo around his body. The court heard that Kristen, with a degree in biochemistry, used her knowledge of drugs and chemistry to terminate Gregory. The prosecution also claimed that Kristen hoped to convince her colleagues in the medical examiner's office that Gregory's death was self-inflicted, hiding information about the fentanyl. However, before Gregory's autopsy could be conducted, she was transferred to another lab, and the attempt to substitute toxicological research was unsuccessful. The prosecution presented Kristen's day on November 6th. Early in the morning, she called Gregory's employer to report his absence, then went to work. Her colleagues testified that about an hour after she arrived at work, around 9 a.m., she was seen crying in Michael's office. The apartment building manager, where Kristen and Gregory lived, reported seeing her return home at 12:10 p.m. At 12:41 p.m., she went to a local grocery store and purchased several items, including a single red rose. Credit card statements confirm this fact. Hours before Gregory's demise, she made multiple calls to Michael. Dr. Brian Blackburn, the San Diego County medical examiner who conducted Gregory's autopsy, testified that Gregory had been deceased for at least an hour before the paramedics arrived. He informed the court that Gregory developed early bronchopneumonia. This condition arises when secretions, normally expelled through breathing, accumulate in the lungs because a person is either unconscious or not breathing deeply enough. Dr. Blackburn also informed the court that Gregory's bladder contained a significant amount of urine, which would have been very uncomfortable had he been conscious. This led Dr. Blackburn to conclude that Gregory was breathing poorly for approximately 6 to 12 hours before his death. A person in an unconscious state would not be able to sprinkle rose petals over themselves. Dr. Blackburn showed that the level of clonazepam found in Gregory's blood was not at an overdose level and was not lethal. Dr. Theodore Stanley testified on behalf of the prosecution. He demonstrated that fentanyl is a potent and fast-acting pain reliever with a serious side effect that can lead to a person's respiratory arrest. Dr. Stanley stated that the speed at which fentanyl begins to act depends on the method of its administration. The peak effect occurs about 16 hours after applying a transdermal patch, 20 to 30 minutes after oral ingestion, 15 to 20 minutes after intramuscular injection, and within 5 minutes after intravenous injection. Dr. Stanley informed the court that fentanyl is usually not administered orally because the liver destroys about 65% of it, so only 35% enters the bloodstream. When asked to explain how fentanyl entered Gregory's system, neither Dr. Blackburn nor Dr. Stanley could provide a definitive opinion. Dr. Stanley showed that various concentration levels in Gregory's body, along with data indicating that Gregory was unconscious and breathing shallowly for several hours before his death, suggest that fentanyl was likely administered to Gregory multiple times. The prosecution could not confidently tell the jury how Kristen poisoned Gregory, but there were indications that she might have applied fentanyl patches to his arm while he was asleep. The disappearance of 15 patches from the laboratory where Kristen formerly worked supported this theory as a possibility. The defense asserted Kristen's innocence, acknowledging that fentanyl was the cause of Gregory's death, but claimed he self-administered it, intentionally causing his own demise due to despair over family issues. Kristen testified in court, describing waking up on the morning of November 6th to find Gregory distraught. She called his employer at 7:42 a.m. to report his illness and that he wouldn't be coming to work. She told the court she went to work but returned to the apartment to check on Gregory, having lunch with him after noon. Christine's testimony. I asked Gregory why he was so upset that morning. He replied that he wasn't feeling well and had taken some oxycodone and clonazepam. He planned to stay home and sleep. I left for work. Around 2:30 in the afternoon during my lunch break, I came home to check on Gregory. We had lunch. I then went back to work. I got home around 8 o'clock in the evening. Gregory was lying on the bed. I thought he was asleep. I took a bath. When I came out, I tried to wake him up. He was cold. I called the emergency services. The prosecutor cross-examined Kristen, calling her explanation strange. She admitted to lying in the past and about her drug use. He told the court that fentanyl was the perfect poison because it's hard to detect, which she knew well from her job. Medical testimony, based on autopsy and toxicological findings, proved that Gregory was unconscious for about 8 hours, meaning Kristen couldn't have had lunch with her husband that day. The defense claimed that although Dr. Blackburn showed the clonazepam level in Gregory's blood wasn't lethal, taking oxycodone, an opioid, and clonazepam, a benzodiazepine, together could create a synergistic effect, making them more potent. They suggested Gregory might have unknowingly taken the drugs himself. How fentanyl was administered and why high levels were found in his system remained unexplained. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found Kristen guilty of first-degree homicide and special circumstances homicide due to the use of poison. She was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Kristen maintained her innocence and appealed the verdict. The appellate court heard that errors were made by her own defense team. Her lawyers admitted fentanyl caused the death, but failed to test autopsy samples for fentanyl metabolites. This test could have determined whether Gregory swallowed fentanyl, or if the fentanyl found in the samples was a result of laboratory contamination after his death. If fentanyl had been detected only in the samples and never in Gregory's body, the prosecution's theory that fentanyl caused his death would have been incorrect. The appellate court heard that there was a break in the chain of custody regarding the samples. They were placed in a cardboard box, with each container marked as a sample from Gregory's body, but the containers weren't sealed. They were supposed to be delivered to the sheriff's office for immediate transfer to an external lab, but the person supposed to receive the samples was absent, so the box remained at the medical examiner's office for about 36 hours before being delivered to the sheriff's forensic lab. The appellate court's argument was that anyone with a key to the medical examiner's office building had access to the samples. Fentanyl could have been added to the samples posthumously. Kristen believed there was a motive to tamper with the samples and frame her for the crime due to various personal relationships and tensions among the staff. Indeed, Kristen argued in the appellate court that on November 8, 2000, Michael informed one of the toxicologists that he had examined a sample of Gregory's stomach contents. The 3-judge panel of the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals concluded that Kristen's lawyers erred in not contesting the prosecution's claim that her husband died from a fentanyl overdose. They stated that her legal team should have tested the autopsy samples for fentanyl metabolites, rather than just admitting he died in such a manner. However, they did not overturn the verdict, but sent the case back to federal court to determine if this defense error could have altered the trial's outcome. After this decision, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that federal courts must adhere to the state court's decision when considering such appeals. Based on this ruling, the appellate court voted against holding a hearing on Kristen's case. Her appeal was denied, and she remains in custody. Michael Robertson was implicated as an accomplice in Kristen's trial. Authorities discreetly filed a criminal conspiracy complaint and issued a sealed warrant for the arrest of Michael Robertson, the former boss and lover of convicted perpetrator Kristen Rossum. Robertson, who lives freely and works as a forensic toxicology consultant in Australia since Rossum's husband's demise in 2000, could be arrested and held on $100,000 bail if he ever returns to the United States. Gregory's family filed a lawsuit accusing the county of negligence that allowed Kristen to steal a lethal dose of drugs from the medical examiner's office undetected. In 2006, a U.S. court awarded them $147 million in civil damages. In a case that continues to captivate the nation, Rossum, a former toxicologist at the county medical examiner's office, was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole in February 2003 for stealing drugs from the lab and using them to poison her husband, Gregory de Villers, staging a suicide scene in their apartment, scattering his body with red rose petals. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lindsay Wilson. In the spring of 1999, the community of Southport in the United Kingdom was divided into 2 camps. The media and television were filled with numerous interviews with Mitchell Quay, a man who, though unremarkable at first, had become a true folk hero. His sudden popularity was sparked by a scandal, the mysterious disappearance of his wife, Lindsay Wilson. According to him, one day she left home without a trace, leaving behind 2 young children. Her distraught husband appeared worried and abandoned. pleading for her to reconsider and return. Along the way, he shared details of their marital life, occasionally speaking unfavorably about his spouse. He believed her behavior was driven by a desire for a free and extravagant lifestyle. Mitchell mentioned seeing his former beloved driving around town in an expensive car, although she just passed by. Most likely, the grief-stricken mother had left her children for a wealthy fiancé. Despite the image portrayed on TV, in reality, he was enjoying a bachelor's life. As a result, one segment of the population sympathized with the lonely man, offering him attention and support, while the other doubted him and suspected him of a horrendous crime. While Mitchell enjoyed widespread attention, law enforcement continued to search for the missing woman. His persona did not inspire trust, and there were complications in the case. According to Lindsay's relatives and friends, the couple's relationship was different from what her husband claimed. Everyone who knew her considered her a faithful wife and caring mother. Therefore, they were convinced something terrible must have happened to Lindsay. Otherwise, she would have made contact long ago. Suspicion was fueled by Mitchell's words during a famous talk show. When the host asked if he had ended his wife's life, his guest said he would not respond to such an indecent question, then paused and added, "Wait and find out." What was the exemplary husband and father implying? Perhaps he knew more than he shared, or was he so confident in his innocence that he was just waiting for everything to fall into place? Answers to these and other questions are forthcoming. At 17, Lindsay discovered she was pregnant. Raised in a caring, large family, she hadn't imagined becoming a mother so early. She wasn't unprepared emotionally, but the fact that her boyfriend, with whom she'd been since she was 13, fled as soon as he learned about the impending fatherhood, both upset and scared her. Lindsay knew all too well the physical and financial demands of motherhood. The Wilson family, though loving and close-knit, had often faced financial challenges to provide for their children. Her parents worked tirelessly. Therefore, when Lindsay met Mitchell Quay 5 months into her pregnancy, she considered it a gift of fate. Mitchell, a 20-year-old, acted like a true gentleman, being attentive and caring. Most importantly, her delicate condition did not deter him. Mitchell assured her he had fallen in love with Lindsay at first sight and wanted to spend his life with her and raise the child as his own. At that time, he was earning well and even started working extra hours, so his beloved would want for nothing. The young couple's parents were shocked when they announced their decision to marry. They felt the 5-week-old relationship hadn't withstood the test of time and circumstances, and thus couldn't genuinely celebrate for them. The only thing Lindsay's relatives noted was that her former cheerfulness and good health had returned. At the same time, the new boyfriend seemed overly sweet to them, even cloyingly polite. Ultimately, no one interfered with their marriage, keeping their doubts to themselves. Red flag. The wedding took place in August 1995, within a close family circle. The majority of the guests were from the bride's side. The groom's side was represented by no more than 5 people: his parents, a brother, and 2 friends. During the celebration, Lindsay was ecstatic, believing she had won the lottery in life. However, the uneasy premonitions of Lindsay's relatives grew heavier when, by the end of the evening, the newlyweds had a dispute. The conflict unfolded before everyone's eyes. Something displeased Mitchell, and he started to shout loudly. It was unlikely that the reason was significant or appropriate for such a reaction. During the argument, he grabbed his new wife by the hand and started shaking her, which looked more than odd and threatening. Lindsay tried to calm him down. When the emotions subsided, the man apologized to everyone and later made light of the incident, emphasizing that it was just nerves due to the holiday bustle. At that moment, the girl did not give due attention to the situation and quickly forgot about it. However, in reality, it became one of the red flags in their toxic relationship. On February 5, 1999, a social worker officially reported Lindsay missing, expressing concern over being unable to reach her client. Lindsay had sought psychological support in a short period of their life together, due to recurring incidents of domestic violence and had bravely reported the situation at home. After her disclosure, the social worker had been monitoring the young family. She informed the police that she had been unable to contact Lindsay for several weeks. Every time she visited the home, Lindsay's husband would answer the door, and he was also the first to answer any phone calls. The dedicated worker mentioned that she repeatedly asked to speak directly to Lindsay, but received evasive excuses. During her visits, she consistently left her contact details, yet Lindsay never called back. The social worker found this situation unsafe and requested a welfare check. Law enforcement responded to the report and visited the address, but were also unable to speak with Lindsay. Her husband, Mitchell, explained that he had not seen his wife at home for a long time, but did not consider her missing. According to him, on Christmas Eve, Lindsay had gone to a party with a friend and returned home early in the morning, somewhat intoxicated. They had an argument, and afterwards, Lindsay packed her belongings and left, without saying goodbye to the children. He claimed she left him for another man and no longer wanted any contact. The search for Lindsay began. During conversations with her relatives, officers learned that she was last seen by her family on December 11th, appearing in high spirits, looking well, and her behavior was normal. Her family had grown accustomed to her troubled marriage. Lindsay's mother also reported that she had tried multiple times to reach her daughter on December 24th to arrange a visit to give Christmas gifts to the grandchildren. Unable to reach Lindsay, she decided to visit in person that day. Mitchell answered the door with the children and told her that his wife had left with friends and accused her of infidelity. However, Mrs. Wilson had long learned to take her son-in-law's words with a grain of salt. After giving the gifts to the children, she left. Detectives found it strange that no one had been concerned about the young woman's well-being for 2 months. However, there was an explanation. Everyone knew that Mitchell restricted his wife's interactions with the outside world, even with close relatives. They had previously experienced difficulty communicating with her. Therefore, it was plausible for Lindsay to drop out of sight for a while. Nonetheless, this did not mean they were not concerned about her. The news alarmed them. Everyone asserted that she did not drink and led a modest lifestyle. Moreover, her husband had forbidden her all contact with the outside world, not to mention meetings with friends and acquaintances. Mitchell told the police contradictory information that aroused the investigators' suspicions about his character. It seemed unlikely that Mitchell could simply let his wife go, and that Lindsay would leave her children with a tyrannical husband. However, the situation demanded a thorough investigation. To this end, the police spoke with all of Lindsay's acquaintances and tried to find anyone who had seen her after the family gathering. They also questioned neighbors and requested surveillance footage from the residential complex where the couple lived and its surroundings. Unfortunately, all footage had been deleted by the time Lindsay's disappearance was noted. Some time had elapsed. However, another date was discovered when she was last seen in person. On December 15th, she was at the local post office sending several letters and postcards as usual. Her older sister also admitted that they met that day. Lindsay had visited despite Mitchell's disapproval. The sisters had tea and a brief conversation, after which Lindsay saw her guest out. On the way, she slipped a note into her sister's hand and asked her to read it later. The sister put the note in her purse and, in the whirlwind of days, forgot about it. Regrettably, the older sister couldn't find it later, and its contents remain unknown. After that day, no one saw Lindsay again. Over several months, investigators tried to cling to any information. They began to suspect that she was no longer alive, as she had not been in contact for so long. They couldn't charge Mitchell without sufficient grounds and evidence. However, the more they learned about the couple's life history, the stronger their suspicions grew. Shortly after their wedding, Mitchell and Lindsay decided to move away from their parents. They rented an apartment in Southport. Sometime later, Lindsay gave birth to a daughter named Robin. The only shadow over the joy of the new baby was her stepfather's volatile temper. After moving, the young wife fully experienced her husband's unstable moods. One moment, he could be joking and laughing. The next, he became unbalanced and aggressive. Trying to maintain a fragile peace at home, she didn't realize how completely she had submitted to his will. He controlled every step she took and caused a scene whenever she failed to hear the phone or answer a call. However, loud arguments were often followed by passionate reconciliations. Mitchell would kneel, beg for forgiveness, and profess his love. It seemed for a while that peace had returned to the family, but then the cycle would start again. Conflict, reconciliation, repetition. Lindsay began to lose recognition of the man she loved. She often told her relatives about what was happening. They advised her to return home and end her suffering, but it was hard for the young woman to admit her mistake. In one interview, the Wilsons mentioned that she always lived with thoughts of the past. Each time, her husband assured her he would change and everything would be fine. As a loving wife, she wanted to believe him and waited for him to return to his former self, gentle and caring. Meanwhile, Mitchell increasingly tightened his grip and control. He forbade his wife to go out alone in the evenings and eventually restricted her from being anywhere without him. He was jealous of her every move, yet he himself was seen in dubious liaisons. Once, Lindsay confided to her older sister that she suspected her husband of infidelity. She told her about a woman who came to their home looking for him and was very surprised to learn he was married. That day, another argument erupted, but this time it escalated to physical violence. Gradually, physical abuse became a part of their life. To prevent his wife from complaining about him and tarnishing his reputation, the man began to limit her interactions, starting with neighbors, friends, and acquaintances, and later with her family. Despite being unhappy, Lindsay still tried to maintain contact secretly, fearing being discovered and punished. At the same time, despite the evident problems, Lindsay continued to stay with Mitchell. Along with her feelings, the comfortable life he provided was a factor. He earned well, supporting her and their child, paying the bills. She truly lacked nothing financially. The era of living in a gilded cage came to an end for Lindsay when she found out she was pregnant again. At that moment, she was certain she no longer wanted more children. It's only fair to note that Mitchell was good to his stepdaughter, even loving her. However, Lindsay deemed the current circumstances unfavorable for bringing another child into the world and decided to terminate the pregnancy. When her husband learned of this, he became enraged, hurling insults and physically intimidating her. That same evening, she packed her things, took her child and returned to her parents' home. Her family breathed a sigh of relief. There, she proceeded with the pregnancy as she had planned. Over time, however, she began to miss her husband. He wouldn't leave her alone, frequently calling and begging her to come back. Mitchell tried everything to prove he had changed, and eventually, he managed to convince Lindsay. Initially, everything went well, and it seemed as if their old feelings had returned. The couple was expecting another child. This peace lasted for 6 months until Mitchell had a severe anger outburst. Fortunately, he did not direct his rage at his pregnant wife, but took it out on the apartment. He smashed everything he could see, destroyed furniture, ripped doors off their hinges, and even stained the walls with blood and food remnants. He threw the television out of the window and smashed the car parked outside. The landlord demanded not only compensation for the damage and repairs, but also that they vacate the apartment. This situation worsened the family's financial position, requiring additional expenses. As a result, the couple had to take out a large loan and move to a more modest apartment. You can't run from yourself. In October 1997, their son Jack was born. Mitchell adored the boy. However, the relationship between the spouses became increasingly tense. Throughout their married life, Mitchell frequently left home, sometimes for a few days, sometimes for a week, often over trivial or fabricated reasons. Lindsay had grown accustomed to her husband's behavior, yet when he abandoned her again, she filed for divorce and returned to her parents' home. Apparently, she realized she couldn't cope with the separation on her own. Therefore, she reached out to a local charity that assists women in difficult life situations. They helped her find subsidized housing in another city. Lindsay feared that Mitchell would discover her new address or phone number, so she took measures to distance herself from him. After he made several threats, she even obtained a restraining order from law enforcement. Mitchell remained unpopular with Lindsay's relatives. They too wanted nothing to do with him. Ultimately, their communication nearly ceased. Despite all efforts, Lindsay repeatedly returned to the abusive relationship. Thus, her circle saw no point in trying to save her anymore. They accepted the situation and stepped back. However, this time, her decision proved to be fatal. At the outset of the investigation into Lindsay's disappearance, Mitchell was initially helpful in the search efforts. However, as the case gained media attention, his focus shifted dramatically. He turned his misfortune into a public spectacle, becoming a media figure in the process. As Mitchell invited more journalists into his home, his abundant media appearances began to seem less genuine, with viewers often noting a smirk on his face. Lindsay's parents considered their son-in-law to be involved in their daughter's disappearance, and detectives also viewed him as the prime suspect. Yet, the lack of direct evidence tied their hands. Searches were conducted not just at the couple's home, but throughout the area. After a provocative question during a televised interview, the antagonist became even more brazen, even declaring that the time would come when his wife's family would have to apologize for their suspicions. On the eve of the holiday season, Mitchell sent a postcard to the lead investigator on the case. Attached to it was a pack of hair dye. Instead of a festive greeting, Mitchell wrote, "I hope this covers your gray and gives you a bit more confidence," mocking the detective and displaying his own arrogance. In February 2000, Mitchell found himself at the center of a scandal with a tarnished reputation. It became known that he had been forging his wife's signature to receive social benefits, serving as another indirect proof of his involvement in Lindsay's disappearance and presumed demise. The investigators wanted to latch on to a financial motive. However, the suspect's popularity worked in his favor. Many supporters emerged, arguing that as a single father, he had every right to financial assistance. These circumstances hindered the detectives' ability to bring the charges they desired. Nevertheless, they managed to charge him with fraud. Mitchell was brought to court for the benefit fraud and was found guilty, sentenced to a month of community service. This time, Mitchell couldn't walk away unscathed. The forgery of his missing wife's signature appeared more than suspicious. The number of angry comments increased. Eventually, the man's patience snapped, and he began lashing out, blaming the media for intruding into his personal life. The case of Lindsay Mitchell's disappearance might have remained unsolved had it not been for a clue discovered by chance. On June 1, 2000, a park goer noticed his dog acting strangely near the roller coaster at a city amusement park. The animal uncovered human remains. Specialists were called to the scene, and the remains were sent for forensic examination, which revealed that they were parts of a female torso. Genetic testing confirmed they belonged to Lindsay, who had been missing for a long time. This breakthrough revitalized the investigation, making it clear that Lindsay had been the victim of a brutal crime. The focus now was to find the perpetrator. On June 7th, Mitchell was brought in for questioning. The detectives were determined, and after more than 36 hours of intermittent interrogation, the suspect broke down under the pressure and confessed to the dismemberment murder. On December 15, 1998, after meeting with her sister, Lindsay informed her husband that she wanted a divorce. This time, she was resolute. According to Mitchell, this news infuriated him, leading him to attack and strangle her. The incident occurred in front of their children. He then hid her lifeless body in their bedroom, stuffing the gap under the door to mask any odors. Realizing he couldn't dispose of the body alone, he enlisted the help of his brother Elliot, a butcher, who he thought could assist. Elliot was initially hesitant, but was eventually persuaded by Mitchell. While the children played in the next room, they dismembered Lindsay's body and later dispersed her remains across the city. During his confession, the murderer expressed no remorse or empathy. Instead, he seemed proud of his actions, stating that without his confession, they would never have proven his guilt. The next day, he led them to the other locations where he had hidden her limbs. Sadly, her head and one hand were never recovered. The forensic comparison confirmed that the remains were indeed Lindsay's. There was no doubt about Mitchell's guilt. The final judgment at the trial of the Key brothers took place in January 2001. The court proceedings were swift and straightforward. Mitchell was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 17 years. The court-appointed psychiatrist noted that the defendant showed all the signs of being a narcissist with sadistic tendencies. His brother Elliot received a 7-year sentence for his role in concealing the crime. Lindsay's children were taken in by her maternal grandparents, who gave them their surname. Just 3 months after the sentence was handed down, another tragedy struck the Lindsay family. One of Lindsay's older brothers, unable to cope with the shock, took his own life in the attic of their family home. In his farewell note, he wrote that he saw no point in continuing in such a cruel world and wished to reunite with his sister. As of 2017, Mitchell Kwai has been eligible for parole. However, as of January 2023, his lawyer's requests have been denied 3 times. Lindsay's family, including the children, are concerned that the murderer might eventually be released. Consequently, they have started a petition urging that he remain incarcerated. As long as the voices of the victim's family are considered, the criminal will continue to serve his sentence. Regardless, no punishment can bring Lindsay back. Experience shows that most women with domestic Stockholm syndrome try to adapt to their abusers throughout their lives. Even when their families come to their aid, they continue to act against their own best interests. In such cases, only deep self-reflection in psychotherapy can help. If the victim does not come to realize the recklessness of their actions, the end of the relationship will be dire